Hey, how's it going? Hope you're all doing great today. So, we've got something pretty cool to talk about. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle just got a fresh update, version 1.0110. And while it might look like a small patch at first glance, there's actually quite a bit worth discussing. You know how sometimes those little updates that show up out of nowhere can end up fixing things that have been quietly annoying players for weeks? Yeah, this one's kind of like that. But before we get into what changed, let's rewind a little and talk about where the game's at right now. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle has had a really interesting journey since launch. It's one of those titles that brought players right back into that adventurous cinematic style that made Indy iconic in the first place. And with the big anniversary update that dropped just recently, it's been in the spotlight again. That update brought a whole wave of new content, things like New Game Plus, a few cosmetic additions, tweaks to gameplay systems, and even a new post-credits ending that got players talking. So, this new patch, 1.010, comes right after that, acting like the cleanup crew to smooth out some of the rough edges that appeared after the big celebration update. Now, let's be honest, most of us love when a game introduces something new, but we also know that big updates can sometimes introduce their fair share of bugs. And that's exactly what happened here. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to be noticeable. So the developers stepped in quickly to patch things up. The highlight fix that most players will appreciate is the one in the main menu. Apparently, there was a strange little glitch where the exit game option could just vanish. Imagine finishing a long session, ready to hop off for the night, and realizing the game doesn't want to let you leave. It sounds minor, but small annoyances like that can totally break immersion. So that's been fixed, and now the exit button is behaving like it should. Another important fix landed in the Order of Giants DLC, which had a journal issue tied to certain side quests. Some players were noticing inconsistencies with how journal entries were tracking progress, like missing notes, incomplete updates, or entries that didn't unlock even after finishing specific quest parts. That's been resolved now, making it easier to keep track of your progress and story clues without feeling like the game's log is gaslighting you. It's one of those fixes that doesn't look major on paper, but if you're someone who likes doing every side quest and keeping a clean record, it's a big relief. Now, even though this patch was small, it's coming on the heels of that massive anniversary update, which was practically a celebration of how far the game has come since launch. That update added a lot of value for returning players. The biggest feature was definitely New Game Plus. It's something fans had been asking for since the early days, and the developers finally delivered it in a pretty thoughtful way. When you start New Game Plus, you get to carry over your adventure books, points, currency, and medicine, but enemies scale up to keep things challenging. It's the kind of mode that rewards you for mastering the game mechanics while still keeping you on your toes. It's not just replaying the same story, it actually feels a little tougher, a little smarter. And of course, they added some new dialogue and a special ending you can only unlock after completing New Game Plus, which gave players that extra push to jump back in. One of the standout additions in that same update was the new Cairo outfit. It's inspired by Raiders of the Lost Ark, and man, it looks good. The attention to detail is spot on. The classic rugged aesthetic, that slightly dusty explorer vibe, it's pure nostalgia done right. Stuff like that might seem cosmetic, but it adds a layer of charm, especially when you're exploring those ancient temples or dusty archives. A lot of players love mixing up outfits depending on the mood or the environment, and this one fits right into Indy's wardrobe without feeling out of place. Another cool improvement from that anniversary update was the new flexibility with audio and subtitles. You can now mix and match languages between voice acting and text. So, for example, you could play with English audio but have the subtitles in German or any combination you want. It's a great accessibility move, and it shows that the developers are listening to global players. Plus, it's just fun to experiment. Some people even said they enjoyed hearing Indy's lines in another language while reading the English translation, just to see how it was localized. The team also added a bunch of technical tweaks for performance. Xbox and handheld players, especially those on the Asus ROG Ally, noticed smoother frame rates and better optimization overall. That's something you really feel in a game like this because of how cinematic it is. Every frame matters when you're swinging across gaps or escaping a collapsing temple. A few months ago, there were small complaints about stutters during cutscenes or transitions, and the latest updates seem to have ironed most of that out. On PC, the load times also seem to have improved slightly since the big update, though that might depend on your setup. But what's really interesting is how this smaller patch shows the devs are paying close attention even after big content drops. Sometimes, after a big anniversary or seasonal update, teams move on to the next big thing and forget to patch up smaller issues. Not here. This update might only have a couple of fixes listed in the notes, but it says a lot about their commitment to polishing the game experience. Fixing something as small as a missing menu option might not sound glamorous, but it's the kind of attention to detail that keeps a game feeling cared for months after release. Players in the community have been talking about how stable the game feels now compared to the early days. Remember when the first patches were mostly about performance stability and fixing clipping bugs? Those were growing pains, and now we're at the stage where patches are more about refinement than repair. It's a good sign for the future, especially if the developers are planning more DLC or post-launch events. The Order of Giants was the first big add-on, but with how well it was received, there's a decent chance we'll see another narrative expansion down the line. Speaking of that DLC, if you haven't played it yet, now's actually a good time. The journal fix means you'll get the full experience without progress tracking issues. It adds a really nice chunk of story that ties into the themes of the main game, but goes deeper into some of the mythological aspects. Without spoiling too much, it explores some really cool historical mysteries that feel right at home in an Indiana Jones story. The level design in those missions is some of the best the game's offered, with clever puzzles and environments that feel alive and ancient at the same time. What's also worth noting about this new patch is that it's the same across all platforms. Whether you're on PlayStation, Xbox, or PC, the version is labeled Complete Version 1.01.0. It's a small touch, but consistency across platforms is always a plus, especially for players who like to compare performance or share clips online. Everyone's now on the same page, literally and figuratively. When you look at the big picture, this patch might be short on flashy new content, but it's the kind of maintenance update that keeps the game feeling smooth and ready for whatever comes next. After the big new Game Plus release, some games would just leave things as is, but this team has clearly made it a habit to fine-tune the experience after every major release. That's a good pattern for long-term support, and honestly, it builds trust. Players notice when developers actually care enough to fix the little stuff. So if you've been away from the game for a bit, now's a pretty great time to jump back in. You'll get to experience the game at its most polished version so far, plus that anniversary update content gives you a perfect excuse to replay it. And if you already finished the main story, the new Game Plus mode gives you a reason to re-experience all those cinematic moments with higher stakes. Maybe you'll even notice details you missed the first time, like the environmental storytelling that's hidden in the ruins, or the subtle ways the camera work changes during key sequences. Those touches are what make this game stand out in the first place. I think what this update really highlights is how far Indiana Jones and the Great Circle has come. It started strong, but over time it's been refined into something even better. Something that really honors the spirit of the franchise while feeling fresh for modern players. Updates like this one might not make headlines, but they quietly keep the game alive, stable, and enjoyable. It's almost like the developers are taking care of their creation the same way Indy takes care of his artifacts. Carefully, respectfully, making sure it endures. And you know what's exciting? With the way this patch rolled out, it kind of feels like they're setting the stage for another wave of content soon. Maybe a teaser for the next DLC or some new in-game event to tie in with the holidays. It wouldn't be surprising if they're using these smaller fixes as prep work for something bigger. Games like this tend to evolve gradually, and every small patch usually hides groundwork for something coming later. For now, though, if you're planning to hop back in, make sure your game's updated, check that the Order of Giants journal bug is fixed on your end, and maybe try out New Game Plus if you haven't already. It's genuinely worth it, especially if you enjoyed the original playthrough.